thank you all for coming. Thank you for your patience. Prime Minister, we first met when you were a very newly minted Likud leader.
When I was young.
Yeah, a quarter century ago. We're delighted to be able to welcome you here today. In fact, it was a group of, as part of a delegation of journalists that was particularly adversarial on that occasion. And what struck me was your willingness to head for the sound of gunfire and to engage, as it were, in hard talk on all the really difficult questions of the day. And that's what our audience will certainly provide today, some difficult bowling. We've got every shade of opinion represented here today, and our usual house rule, no question too outrageous, you just have to state your name and organisation before doing so. It's a particular pleasure to welcome you here at this historic juncture in the international scene. It's a particular pleasure also because, as I'm sure many of you know, you've already passed the moment where you are now the longest serving Israeli Prime Minister in a consecutive single term of office, and next year you will surpass David Ben-Gurion's record as the longest serving Israeli Prime Minister of all time. As I'm sure everyone here knows, Israeli politics is a contact sport. And so if I may mix the sporting metaphors, to stay on the surfboard for a decade plus in the face of the international scene, in the face of differing US administrations, I'm being very diplomatic on that, and also in the domestic context of Israel. I think when we first met, we talked about Charles de Gaulle's famous line, how can anyone govern a nation with 264 different kinds of cheeses? We haven't yet come up with the Israeli equivalent thereof, but managing an Israeli coalition is a difficult matter indeed. The second dimension of particular interest to us here at Policy Exchange, of course, is the domestic agenda, and of course your period as finance minister handed to you as a poison chalice in a different era, but the boom since then in the Israeli economy through the reforms that you initiated have attracted enormous attention globally, and perhaps you might care to reflect on them a little today here in the light of our own work of domestic policy as well. We're delighted that you're here. We're delighted William Shawcross, distinguished author, biographer, will conduct the interview. We're then throwing it open, as I say, for question and answer. It's a great week for us. It's you're the culmination of that, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome, Prime Minister. It's a great pleasure to be here with you to talk to you today, particularly because you're on a visit to the chiefs of Europe, the EU3, who were most involved in the Iran nuclear agreement created mostly by President Obama. It's been said that the EU3, that's Britain, Germany and France, and probably other European countries, went into a state of shock and mourning when President Trump unilaterally decided to withdraw the United States participation from the deal. Do you think we're now moving out of mourning through grief into acceptance? Is that the impression you have from your visit this week?
Well, I'll tell you what I told them. First, I'll tell you what I didn't tell them. I didn't tell them pull out of the Iran agreement, because I think it's the United States decided to pull out of this in a minute. The weight of the American economy forces the issue. I mean, if you're a European company or an Asian company or any company, and you have to choose whether to do business with Iran or forego doing business with the United States, you have to choose an economy that is about 3% of the size of the American economy, or forego an economy of $21 trillion GDP. And that's a no-brainer, and everybody's choosing it effectively as we speak. And companies are pulling out of Iran, and it's a good thing that they're pulling out of Iran, because if we learn anything is stop aggressive tyrannical regimes early on. Don't accommodate them. For God's sake, don't feed them with cash. Stop them. And that's what I think is happening now. So I didn't spend much time on that, because I think it's done. It's a done deal in the other meaning of the word.
Well, with great respect, you must have spent quite a lot of time on it.
I have a request. I'm sorry. This is my late father, who was a great historian, would go into a restaurant, and he'd be given a table, and he'd said, after 2 minutes, he'd say, "Do you have another table?" That's an.
Are you allowed to do that now?
No. Can you turn off the lights a bit? It's awfully warm here. Is it possible? No?
I doubt it is, because you've got the BBC, CNN, and goodness knows who else in the back.
Continue. Same table. Fine.
Same table. Okay, good. And we've got very good water here too, so that's all right.
Thank you.
But you must have spent quite a lot of time talking about Iran with the three leaders. I mean, it was at least it's been billed as that was your primary purpose, to tell them exactly what you told us. Are any of them still resisting the logic that you've just outlined and still trying to? Publicly, they say they're still trying to take the deal forward without America.
I don't want to put words in their mouth, but my impression is that everybody understands the economic realities that I just said, and there's a common goal that we share, and the common goal is to make sure Iran doesn't get nuclear weapons. I think the deal was flawed because basically what the deal said is don't enrich uranium for one bomb, and in exchange for that, Iran, within a few years, you can enrich uranium in an unlimited amount for 100 bombs, 200 bombs, which I thought was a terrible deal. And in addition to that, they were given a lot of money and a lot of credit, billions and billions of dollars, which they promptly spent not to moderate Iran, but to, in fact, to fuel their dreams of empire and conquest throughout the Middle East, in Yemen, in Syria, and elsewhere. So the deal was bad any way you looked at it. And the fact now that people are, that the American administration is saying, enough of that. This aggressive regime is not going to have a cash machine. We smashed it. It's, in fact, smashed. This machine, cash machine for conquest has been stopped, dead in its tracks. And I think people recognize that, and I think the task now is to make sure that Iran does not pursue either a weapons program, which we uncovered, or its campaign of conquest.
Can you tell us a bit about your...
And so my real focus in this visit was not about the deal. My real focus was about reversing Iran's aggression in the region, namely getting them out of Syria, all of Syria. That's what I spoke about, and I have to say that I found considerable agreement on that goal.
In all three countries?
Yes.
And how are they to be got out of Syria?
First of all, ask them to, demand it. Also, we have to recognize that we are not going to let Iran entrench themselves in Syria in order to achieve their declared goal. When I say declared, the ruler of Iran declared it, and again, 3 days ago, to destroy Israel. So they want to stockpile weapons, lethal weapons in Syria to be able to fire rockets at all of Israel. And we're not going to sit there and wait for that to happen. So we're taking action against that. So we'll continue to do that.
So the world can expect a continuous military action by Israel against Iranian positions throughout Syria?
If they continue to entrench themselves militarily, and they're doing it not to fight Daesh, ISIS. Daesh is gone. It's finished. They're doing it, as they openly say they're doing it, in order to attack Israel with a view of destroying it. I think if we've learned anything from history, including British history, is you don't accommodate an aggressive regime that is taking territory, is building up armaments with the view of conquering you. You take action against them early on. Bad things should be opposed at their beginnings, not after they become horrendously dangerous.
And do you think that the three countries with which you've been talking this week will accept such a level of Israeli engagement in Syria?
Well, they backed us up, actually, against Iranian aggression, I have to say, and I'm very glad to have heard when Iran fired missiles at us from Syria, and we took action against Iran. The European position actually was very supportive, and I appreciate that. And I think it makes sense. It's also something that is shared, this opposition to Iran's aggression throughout the Middle East is shared by us and just about all the Arab states. So, when Arabs and Israelis agree on something, it's worth paying attention, because we must know something. And we do know that Iran has to be opposed for the future of peace and stability and security in our region. I didn't find opposition to that proposition. And I think that if we all agree on the goal of getting Iran out of Syria, then I think there's a chance of achieving them. My experience is you can get someplace if you know where you're going. And I think just plotting that goal is the first step of achieving it.
And what about the Russian attitude? You went to Russia quite recently, and then it was notable that after your return to Israel, there was another attack mounted by Israel against Iranian positions, and the Russians were the dog that did not bark. They were very silent on that. Do you think you have at least tacit Russian support despite their alliance with Syria and Iran?
Is there a Baker Street here?
Is there a Baker Street here? There is up the road.
Yeah, well, that's the dog that didn't bark. So I can't...
Well, your knowledge of English literature is very good.
Yeah, well, I can't possibly refer to our international colleagues in those terms. But I will say that I spoke to Mr. Putin many times, actually in the last 3 years, several times, because his forces are very close to ours. And I said, look, we have a legitimate right to defend ourselves against the Iranian regime that seeks to obliterate us. And therefore, if they move their weapons close to our border with a view of attacking us, we'll take preventive action. And we don't want to clash with you. So let's, this is a horrible word, let's deconflict. I hate jargon.
Yeah, we'll think of another word for it.
But let's make sure that we don't bump into each other or shoot each other's planes from the skies, which is really what this means. And we agreed. And I'm glad to say that we've succeeded in maintaining this line of communication. So we've not had any clashes. I think Mr. Putin understands that Israel is doing what any country would do faced with a foe that is out to destroy it. And so far it's been holding. I hope it'll continue to hold.
So the Russians are turning a blind eye to your actions in Syria, self-defense actions.
I'm not sure they're blind.
We're not sure of that.
Well, I think they can see very well what we're doing.
Okay, well, they're not fine. I'm sure there will be questions on Iran later, but I think we should move to Gaza because it's on everybody's mind. After the horrific events in early May, I think it was May the 14th, when 40,000 protesters were encouraged, if not ordered by Hamas, to congregate on the Gaza side of the fence that's the border between Israel and Gaza. Some 62 Palestinians were killed by the IDF. Now, the world was outraged, and Hamas has discovered a brilliant way of damaging Israel in the eyes of the world. And I'm puzzled because Israel is one of the most sophisticated countries in the world technologically. The IDF is an extremely well-disciplined army. And I don't understand why you haven't yet managed to devise a non-lethal method of crowd control which does not bring Israel into such public disrepute throughout the world.
Well, you raised 2 points here. One is what actually happened, and second, how it's perceived. On the question of, it's very hard to avoid the perception of an easy falsehood. This is a peaceful protest. This is just Martin Luther King or Mother Teresa. They're on their side of the fence and they're protesting. And by the way, what are they protesting? They're protesting.
I don't understand why you bring in Martin Luther King or Mother Teresa.
It's because the idea of nonviolent protest is something that we all agree with. I mean, who could oppose it? I don't oppose it. They can protest as much as they want and demonstrate as much as they want. But that's not what Hamas is organizing. They're organizing a violent assault into Israel with a view of destroying us, which they openly proclaim, in order to break the fence, the border fence, and kidnap and murder Israelis that are 100 meters away in communities that align the fence and so on. So this is not a peaceful protest. They come in with pipe bombs, they come in with weapons, they come in with explosives, and they pretend that it's a peaceful protest. They organize this Hamas, they pay for some civilians to come, but mostly it's their own families. So first let's show what they say happened on the day that you talk about. Indeed, 62 people died. Who were these 62? This is Hamas's own spokesman. It's not me. Hamas official Salah Bardawil confirms the majority of the casualties during the Gaza fence riots were Hamas members. 50 of the martyrs were from Hamas. Exactly.
Why would they confirm that so quickly?
I don't know. That's a very good.
It's extraordinary.
Yes, because we have their names and we have their pictures and their photos, which, by the way, I'd like you to bring next time. Let's just show who they are and the record of these so-called peaceful protesters. They're not peaceful protesters. They're Hamas vicious terrorists.
But some peaceful, I mean, it's astonishing to me that Hamas admitted very, very quickly that the vast majority were Hamas members, but some were innocent civilians. And I return to the question, can't you devise a better way of dealing with unpeaceful?
Okay, so I asked the same question. Mr. Shawcross, I said to our technological people, you have performed wonders. You've developed a bullet to hit a bullet. That's our anti-aircraft, anti-missile technology. You've developed, for the first time in history, an ability to discover tunnels underground. People have been working on that one since the time of the Babylonians. Can you not find to stop this kind of tactic with non-lethal means? Because we tried water cannon, we tried tear gas, we tried all sorts of other devices, and none has worked against this kind of tactic. So they're working on it, and given our record, we probably will figure out something, but we haven't gotten it yet. And by the way, when I talk with the European leaders, I always say, okay, what would you do? Can you give us some technology? I'd like to know if you have the ability to do this, because we'll gladly use it. The last thing we want is any violence. The last thing we want is casualties. And the last thing we want is confrontation. But if, as I said in France, just imagine that you had the equivalent of 20 million people on the borders of France, commandeered by a terrorist organization committed to the destruction of France and the burning of Paris, and they're about to cross the border into France, and they're going to murder and kidnap any French citizen they can see, and you try to stop them. And water cannon doesn't work, and tear gas doesn't work. What would you do? I never received an answer for that one.
And so no other state, not even the United States, is more advanced than Israel on these matters, a preventive, non-lethal.
Well, that was the case a few years ago on tunnel technology, and we worked on it and worked on it and worked on it and devised a solution. I hope that will happen now. No country in the world. I talked to NASA about tunnels. I talked to every country that you can imagine. I mean, here's what it is. Look at that. Terror tunnels, rockets and mortars, we've solved that one. Arson kites, they're now burning our fields, and we're figuring out technology to prevent that. These are the fields of the country they say they love, and they're burning it outright. So, I mean, this is a violent, vile terrorist organization that masquerades as peaceful protests. And what they're actually opposed to is the very existence of the State of Israel. And if they weren't, if Hamas wasn't this tyrannical, theological, horrible gang that has hijacked 2 million people in Gaza, we'd have had peace long ago. And that's true of the Palestinians on the other side, in the West Bank, in Judea and Samaria. The reason we don't have peace is a very simple reason. They don't want to recognize a Jewish state in any boundary. And because they continue to seek our destruction through various means, that we don't have peace. Otherwise, there would have been peace long ago. The issue between us and the Palestinians has never been a Palestinian state. It's always been the Jewish state. The Palestinians were offered a Palestinian state time and time again. Effectively in the Peel Commission in the 1930s, in the Partition Resolution in 1947, and successive Israeli governments since then, and they've always said no. It's not a Palestinian state they want, it's the destruction of the Jewish state. They don't want a state next to Israel, they want a state instead of Israel. And it's kind of hard making peace with somebody who wants to seek your destruction. How can you make peace with Al-Qaeda or with Daesh? It's a non-negotiable idea that Britain would be destroyed or Israel would be destroyed. But the minute you have a leader like Anwar Sadat, the late president of Egypt, who said, okay, that issue is off the table. We recognize Israel's right to exist. we have peace. The same happened with King Hussein of Jordan. We recognize Israel's right to exist, we have peace. And the same will happen when the Palestinians produce a Sadat or a King Hussein or any leader that recognizes Israel's right to exist, we'll have peace.
Well, I don't think anybody in this room would disagree with your definition or description of Hamas. It is a vile terrorist dictatorship. There's no question about that, which wishes to destroy Israel. But you're bringing up Anwar Sadat and King Hussein prompts me to ask you, how do you think the possibilities of a settlement of the Palestinian issue, which must be something you worry about all the time, every Israeli that I know does, how are the prospects improved by the rapprochement between you and the Sunni states, which is quite extraordinary in the last couple of years? Do you think from that you may develop they may develop an Anwar Sadat type of initiative?
The Palestinians are 1% of the Arab world. 99% are not Palestinians, and they live in 20-odd countries that have been, two of which have made peace with us, Jordan and Egypt. And I think the possibility of expanding, if not a formal peace, but an actual peace, not merely non-belligerence, but gradually normalizing relations is before us. Why is that happening? The first reason is Iran. The second reason is Iran. The third reason is Iran.
Right, can you expand on that?
Yep. Can you put on a map here? Okay. Here's what Iran has been doing since the nuclear deal, by the way. I mean, Iran has moved to actually try to colonize Iraq. Yeah, oh, thank you. Does this work? Oh, amazing. Israeli technology at its best. Iran was here, and Iran was in Lebanon. Now it's trying to outright take over Iraq, and certainly in Syria they want to bring their army 1,000 miles from Iran to Syria in order to destroy Israel from Syria. They also have established a similar arrangement in Yemen, similar to Lebanon, and they're firing rockets into Riyadh, which is right here, 700 kilometers away. So Iran is on a campaign of conquest following the nuclear deal, which was supposed to bring them into the community of nations. And as I said, instead they're devouring one nation after another with the money given to them by the nuclear deal. So this was really a bad deal any way you construct it. So who agrees with me on that? Okay, here are the countries of the Middle East, the Arab countries, just about every one of them agrees with me on that, and I agree with them. That has created a newfound friendship because they understand that Iran ultimately wants to conquer all of them. It actually wants to go beyond that. Could you show what, here's the commander of Iran's Revolutionary Guards. Here's what he says. No, not that. He says, Ali Jafri, the commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps in Iran, we're on the path that leads to the rule of Islam worldwide. What? This is not a cleric. This is a general. And he's basically saying we're in this theological militarism that is meant to, obviously, to convert all these Muslim countries to Iran's Shiism and subordinate.
But that's impossible, isn't it? I mean, that alone is impossible.
It's a mad idea, but mad ideas have, before they failed, have claimed the lives of millions. We know that. And so Iran doesn't believe in a master race. Iran believes in a master faith. This is what all the militant Islamists believe. They believe that they will subordinate first the Muslims and then all the infidels to their mad designs. And they really believe it. Here's their commander. This is not some Ayatollah. This is a general. And there are others who proclaim the same goal. So the Arabs understand this. And they understand that they're in great peril. And they look around and they say, well, who's our partner against this, this madness? And they say Israel. They now see others. I think they now see the United States, and that's a very important change. So that's bringing them together to us in the first instance. There's a second reason why our relations are normalizing with the Arabs today, with the Arab world, with the other 99%, in stages. The reason that it's changing is because they also want civilian technology. You know, they all have to have water and clean air and health and IT and so on. And Israel, as you know, is a global technological powerhouse. And so they can envision, and some of them talk about it, envision this Israeli cooperation, not only on security, but also on technology. And I think that they're right. So I'm very hopeful in that respect that we can normalize gradually relations with the Arab world, and that would affect the 1%. But let me also say that it's a battle for the public opinion in the Arab street. Here's an interesting thing that's happening. That's beginning to change. I don't want to overstress it, but we're measuring it. You know, you can too. You can just go on the internet and spend $1,000 and you can check what is happening. And it's kind of interesting. Here's what we see. Are you interested in relations with Israel? And a few years ago it would be 0. But you can see across quite a few of the Arab countries that there is a substantial minority that is beginning to say, that's not a bad idea. You know, we might benefit from this. So these are positive signs. Again, I don't want to overstate them, but I think that there's a community of interest right now, both in security and in civilian development, that I think is creating the possibility of changing the equation. We used to say, if we have peace with the Palestinians, we have peace with the rest of the Arab world. It might be that if it's the other way around, or to be more precise, if we gradually normalize relations with the Arab countries, it could advance the peace with the Palestinians. And we should do both. We're waiting for a Palestinian partner, but we're continuing to do both.
Well, let's concentrate on that for a moment, on peace with the Palestinians. I mean, I totally understand and believe that the Palestinians are very badly served by their leaders, from Arafat onwards. Arafat actually, going back to what you said 10 minutes ago, Arafat did originally agree at Camp David to a two-state solution, and then reneged upon it. The two-state solution is always held out, and it was held out by the Obama administration and Secretary Kerry and so on as the ultimate goal. You supported it in your Bar-Ilan speech, but that was in 2009. Do you still support the goal of reaching a two-state solution?
I haven't changed my view, and it can be summed up in a very simple way. The Palestinians should have all the powers to govern themselves, and none of the powers to threaten us. So from day one...
None of the powers to threaten us.
Yes, yeah. That means that in the tiny area from the Jordan River to the sea, can you show it? Here's the tiny area from the Jordan River to the sea, okay? This is mighty Israel. Greater London is here. That's it, okay? This is the West Bank, Judea, Samaria. This is Gaza. So Israel here, from the edge of the West Bank to the sea, as I explained to President Trump in his visit to Israel, is the distance from the George Washington Bridge to Trump Tower. You know, so you sort of think that, you know, under any circumstance, and here's our experience. We got out of Gaza, which is right here, okay? And in about 5 seconds, Hamas and Iran overtook it. Hamas and Islamic Jihad, which is beholden to Iran, they overtook it. And now they're firing rockets into Tel Aviv, Beersheba, any part of Israel. We got out of Lebanon, and within 5 minutes, Hezbollah, which means Iran, took southern Lebanon and fired thousands of rockets into Israel. So we can't do the same thing here in the West Bank, which is 20 times the size of Gaza. We'll simply not survive. And therefore, the Palestinians should be able to have their independence, their governance. I don't care about that. But in the area, this tiny area, from the Jordan River to the sea, the overriding security power must remain with Israel. Now people say, oh, but that's not full independence. Well, in the failed state mosaic of the Middle East, it's just a mosaic of failed states. There's no other way to keep security and to keep the peace. And some people say that's state minus or it's autonomy plus, and I say, look, I don't want to brand it. I want to tell you, not the branding, but the actual proposition that I'm putting forward is that they have all the powers to govern, but not the powers to threaten us, which means security remains with Israel. And if that earns me a bad editorial in an unnamed British newspaper, or many of them, I don't care. I take care of the survival of the state of Israel. And I maintain that the survival of the state of Israel is also necessary for the survival or the possibility of peace in the Middle East.
I think much of the room agrees with you on that.
Oh, good.
I'm running out of time because there are a lot of people who want to ask questions. But just what do you want to be your legacy? You've been Prime Minister for a very long time, as Dean said. What do you want to be your legacy? You don't presumably want to leave the Palestinian situation as it is now.
I think it's possible to advance a solution. The American administration is working on such a solution. I've said that I would entertain, I would listen to it, and I would consider it, just as when Secretary Kerry under Obama proposed a plan. I said there are some parts I don't like, but I'm willing to sit down and talk about it, which, by the way, he doesn't refuse. Now he refuses on a different pretext to consider an American plan, and he says that this administration is pro-Israeli. Well, I didn't say to President Obama, to Secretary Kerry, I will not consider your proposal because you're pro-Palestinian. For God's sake, if you want peace, there are two things that you need to do. The first thing is sit down and negotiate the peace, and the second is recognize the Jewish state. For God's sake, do it already, because that's the underlying problem.
One last question from me for now, at least.
How would I like to be remembered?
Yeah, but you...
I don't want to be remembered, not just yet, but...
You don't want to be remembered?
Not yet.
No. But how do you want to be judged then now, if not remembered?
As the defender of Israel and as the liberator of its economy. That's it.
Okay, that's pretty precise. One last question for now. How does dealing with President Trump differ from dealing with President Obama?
Your father was a prosecutor, wasn't he?
He was the chief British prosecutor at Nuremberg.
No, but looks like it continued. I've done very well with American presidents, those I agreed with, those I disagreed with. I want to remind you that with President Obama, I had signed a 10-year agreement for American security assistance to Israel to the tune of $38 billion. It's something I always be appreciative of and grateful for. And so we had our agreements and we had our disagreements. The main disagreement that we had was on the question of Iran, and I was quite forthright about it. I thought the deal, as it turned out, I think correctly, jeopardizes our security and will allow Iran to enrich uranium and will allow Iran at the same time to enrich its coffers for its dreams of empire. So obviously I opposed it because I thought it puts the very survival of my country in peril. But there were areas that we agreed upon and worked on, and I appreciate that.
Well, you haven't really answered my question.
There's no disagreement between President Trump and me on Iran. I appreciate that very much, as I appreciate his decision, which I think is historic, to recognize Israel as Jerusalem as Israel's capital, to move the embassy there. I think this is very important historically. I think it's, you look at the milestone of the 20th century towards the day, and it began with the Balfour Declaration 101 years ago, here, in this city. I was at Boris's office yesterday, and Boris Johnson's the foreign secretary, and that declaration was signed there on that desk. It's quite amazing. Yeah. And it was followed by President Truman's recognition of the Jewish state minutes after the partition resolution was approved in the UN. And I think this will stand the time also in time among these historic decisions. Why? Because Jerusalem has been the capital of the Jewish people for 3,000 years, since the time of King David. It's been Israel's capital for 70 years. All the offices of state are there. The Prime Minister's office, the Knesset, the Supreme Court, and they're all going to be there. I mean, they're not going to move away. Any conception of peace would have Jerusalem as Israel's capital. So why not recognize facts? Just like recognizing the fact that there has to be a Jewish state in order for there to be peace. There has to be, this state has its capital. Every country chooses its capital. The British people have chosen London as their capital. We don't contest that. The French people have chosen Paris.
But the Palestinians have also chosen Jerusalem.
Yes, but the argument is it part of Jerusalem or not? Nobody contests, I hope, the part of Jerusalem that is where these institutions sit and will continue to sit. There is disagreement, yes. We claim all of Jerusalem, but the fact is they shouldn't reject part of Jerusalem. Why should European governments say that the capital of Israel will not be in Jerusalem when they know very well that this is a fact that will continue? Okay, they always say, well, it's the partition resolution. I have to check this, so I'm going out on a limb here. As far as I know, the partition resolution, they say, decided to internationalize Jerusalem, something that is not going to happen. And nobody actually claims that today. But under that same resolution, Bethlehem, I think, was supposed to be part of an international regime. So are those people who say they wouldn't recognize Jerusalem today now say we should take Bethlehem away from the Palestinians? That should be internationalized too? Of course they don't say it. These are facts. Jerusalem is Israel's capital. I'm very glad that President Trump finally said something that everybody knows is true.
Good. Well, I think there may be people on the floor who want to ask you further on that issue. I have many questions. The gentleman there in the blue tie, would you state your name and organisation, please?
Michael Howard, House of Lords. Prime Minister, many people will sympathise with and understand the need to stop the people scaling the fence at Gaza. And of course you're absolutely right that the protests were not peaceful. But fewer people, despite your answers to William, will sympathise with and understand the proposition that the only way to stop them scaling the fence was to kill them. Why couldn't you use rubber bullets? Why couldn't you, if in extremis you had to use live ammunition, why couldn't you shoot them in the legs? Why did you have to kill them to stop them scaling the fence?
Everything you said, Mr. Howard, has been tried, and other things, and it didn't work. And in fact, nobody intentionally went out to kill anyone. People died accidentally. And I can tell you that Hamas, at a certain point, said, not enough people are being killed. Push more. Let the Jews kill more. Their goal was to have as many casualties. Our goal was to minimize casualties and avoid fatalities. But there's only one thing that I would do. There's only one way that you can actually put this to the test. If you had a similar situation here, and you tried it, and I'll tell you what, if you're successful in finding non-lethal means to stop this, I would be the first one to use it, as I've asked our technological people to try to develop this. This is a new tactic. It's a new form of warfare. It's trying to attack civilians who are hiding behind civilians, which is essentially what the Hamas is doing anyway. It's when they put their rockets inside schools and homes, and they fire on our homes. This is a double war crime. So they continue it. It just photographs better. But the fact is that they're doing something unconscionable. They're actually throwing their fighters, 50 out of 62, Hamas terrorists, and they put civilians in front of them as a human shield, try to cross the fence and kill Israelis and kidnap them. If you find a way, I cannot tell you that that we've exhausted the future possibilities because we're investing in this very heavily now. But we did not find a means yet to stop them, and any country would stop a direct assault on the lives of its citizens if they were in our place.
The gentleman with the elegant beard. Is that
Several people rose, yes.
with glasses? Actually, I meant the man next to you, sorry.
We're both Jonathans.
Do you have a beard? I don't know you don't, actually. I apologize. It's the shadows of the lighting.
My question is about Iran and Syria. Real quickly, about a week ago, a Syrian Air Force commander said, from now on, we will not allow Iranian and Hezbollah armaments to be stored in our hangars following a series of attacks by an unnamed country. Do you think the Syrian government will eventually get the picture and start to find a way to minimize Iranian influence in Syria and ultimately to get rid of the Iranians?
Let me show you what Iran is trying to do in Syria. It's trying, as I said, to move its army 1,000 miles from Iran, which is here, to Syria, which is here, and Israel is right here. That's Israel. So they want to bring in aircraft. They've already brought in anti-aircraft batteries that reach deep into Israel, 150 kilometers. So they can actually bring down our civilian aircraft. They want to, and most important, they want to bring in ground, surface-to-surface rockets that are precision-guided and have half-a-ton warheads. So this could land anywhere in Israel. Could land in Tel Aviv or in Jerusalem and so on. And it's a devastating thing. And they also want to bring submarines to the Mediterranean. Can you imagine? So this is a real imperial, aggressive implantation of the military, Iranian military, with a view of destroying Israel. When we attacked these positions, when Iran fired at us and we attacked their positions, 30 positions here, the Syrian army fired at us, fired at our munitions. And as a result, we destroyed 6 Syrian anti-aircraft batteries. I think Mr. Assad has to consider this. As long as they waged this horrific civil war, internal war, inside Syria, Israel did not intervene. The only thing that I did was to establish a hospital on our side of the fence here in the Golan Heights, and we took care of thousands of civilians, Syrian civilians, a humanitarian intervention. But we really didn't intervene. Now that the war is over, Daesh is finished, it's nearly over, and he invites or allows Iran to come in to entrench itself with a view of attacking Israel, potentially destroying Israel from Syrian territory, he is no longer immune. His regime is no longer immune. And if he fires at us, as we've just demonstrated, we'll destroy his forces. So I think there's a new calculus that has to take place. And Syria has to understand that Israel will not tolerate the Iranian military entrenchment in Syria against Israel. And the consequences are not merely to the Iranian forces there, but to the Assad regime as well. I think there's it's something that he should consider very seriously.
Okay. Now, I think the gentleman next to the last questioner, who does have a beard, I think, the lights are very helpful. Could you state your name and organisation?
Hi, I'm Jonathan Hoffman, former Zionist Federation Vice President and blogger. Prime Minister, in 3 days' time, if you were to stay in London, you would be able to see a march with Hezbollah flags and a march where Israel is vilified, where they say that Zionism is racism. Do you have any comment on the fact that our government in the United Kingdom believes that there are 2 wings of Hezbollah, the political wing and the military wing, and that flags in the streets of London, if they designate the political wing of Hezbollah, are okay? Do you have any comment on that?
I think this is wrong. They're both seeking the destruction of not only of Israel, but of Jews. And they're, it's like saying, well, the SS is bad, but the Nazi political wing is okay. No, they want our destruction. They openly say it. So I think this is wrong. It's just wrong. The support of Hezbollah and Hamas by people who claim that they have progressive values, I mean, these are horrible people. It's the worst theocratic gangsters in the world. They believe in nothing that we believe. They don't believe in pluralism. They don't believe in the rights of women. They don't believe in, they hang gays. I mean, horrible things. Why are progressive forces going behind the most anti-progressive forces in the world? There's something really off. And you know what? They're doing it because they're against Israel. you know? I don't hear them protesting elsewhere. Why are they protesting only against us? The one democracy in the world, the one country that recognizes human rights, that protects human rights in an independent judiciary, that has Arabs and women and gays and everyone represented in their political system. This is the country they choose to attack and affiliate with the most regressive forces in the world. You know, there's a name for this. It is the name. Anti-Semitism.
That's a huge new issue.
It's a wonderful issue.
And I agree with that. I'd love to talk to you about that, but I don't think I should steal others. Dean, you were pointing to somebody. I think this gentleman here, who's got which one?
I didn't mean that anti-Semitism is a wonderful thing.
No, I know.
I mean that it's important to call things as they are. And I call them as they are. This is pure and simple anti-Semitism. The idea of aligning with these horrible forces that murder their own people, that execute people, their own people at gunpoint, that espouse this medieval barbarism against the forces of modernity and pluralism, I think there's something deeply wrong in this. And who's at fault here? It's not Israel.
Well, don't answer me. But one reason...
Well, I'm trying to be diplomatic.
Very good. One reason, as we've discussed already, for the hostility, growing hostility perhaps in Western Europe, especially amongst progressives and the Labour Party, part of the Labour leadership here, is because of Gaza and the West Bank and the failure to find a solution.
I disagree.
Very eloquent.
I disagree with that completely. Anyway, Mr. Shawcross, I want to ask you something. If that's the case, why aren't they protesting with the same vehemence against millions who are butchered and made homeless everywhere in the world? They don't do that. Why they're not protesting countries that are occupying other countries, moving their populations? I hear nothing of that. Nothing of that. This is not because of any wrongdoing that Israel is making. It's because Israel exists. This is what is the thing that they're really protesting in. If they adopted a uniform standard, I'd give you an argument. But they're not. So they're leaving aside all the wrongs in the world and concentrating on the one and only Jewish state that is surrounded by people who openly declare their desire to obliterate us, and they side with the obliterators. I can't buy this as a moral position.
I would just say I accept that anti-Semitism is growing, and it is a vicious, evil force that we all in this country have to combat. There's a gentleman there who's been waiting very patiently.
I've been waiting very patiently, William. Thank you very much.
Your name and organisation?
Jason Cowley, editor of the New Statesman magazine. Prime Minister, very good to have you here in London. Actually, a coda to your remarks on anti-Semitism. The Israeli Labour Party has severed its historic ties to the British Labour Party. Long-standing relationship between the Israeli Labour Party...
No, I don't think that's true.
I think there was a great deal And the question I want to ask is, are you disturbed by the reports of anti-Semitism within the Labour Party? This great institution, Clement Attlee, Harold Wilson, Tony Blair, now led by Jeremy Corbyn. And many would suggest the Labour Party has been infected by anti-Semitism. Are you aware of this, and what do you think about it?
I'm concerned with the growth of anti-Semitism anywhere, and in any quarter. There's anti-Semitism on the left, and there's anti-Semitism on the right, and wherever I see it, I oppose it. I think that the Labour Party has been historically a bastion of support for Zionism, and I value its contributions over the years. Yesterday I met with parliamentarians from both the Conservative Party and the Labour Party who support Israel. I recognize there's a strain. I recognize that. But I hope that people in Britain look honestly and fairly at the picture in the Middle East, the picture in the world. And I hope that they recognize something that they evidently do not understand yet, that there's a whole realignment taking place in the Middle East. They're sort of stuck in the past. The relationship between Israel and the Arabs is changing very dramatically, very dramatically. And I think that if they sees with us the future, then we can resolve a lot of these problems. I think that's important. The other thing, I hope, I wouldn't tolerate anti-Semitism anywhere, and I hope that it is attacked and rolled back in the Labour Party, I hope by its own leaders. Let me show you one thing that is happening in the world which will astonish you. Because people think, oh my God, Israel, we have the occasional statements of BDS and the occasional... Here's Israel's relations in 2017, new agreements that we signed. That's the blue, okay? I was in Africa 3 times in 18 months. I was in South America and Latin America. The first Israeli Prime Minister had gone there. Can you imagine? Nobody went there south of Texas for 70 years. But we were greeted with enormous friendship and a desire to meet with us. We signed new agreements with India, China, Japan. Japanese investment in Israel has grown in the last 3 years 20-fold. New agreements with Australia. First visit to Singapore ever, agreements with Russia, with Muslim countries, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, whom I visited again for the first time. What does that tell you? It means, and of course in Europe, I mean Central Europe, Eastern Europe, I think there's a West European problem with recognizing that the world has changed. The most dramatic changes of all of these 6 continents. If you divide North and South America, 2 continents, 6 continents in 1 year. Unbelievable flourishing of Israel's diplomatic relations and economic relations with these countries. Their relationship to Israel, their view of Israel is radically changed. But the greatest and the most radical shift is in the Arab world itself. What do they recognize? That Israel has great benefits for them. First, Israel has prevented, with our superb intelligence, terrorist attacks in dozens of countries across the globe, including our fantastic cooperation with British intelligence, and we've helped save many British and European lives. You just heard about an airliner that we prevented from being downed, exploded in midair from Australia to the Gulf. There are many, many other terror incidents, gigantic terror incidents, that have been prevented by Israeli intelligence. And all countries today are affected by the fear of radical Islamic terror, so Israel is supporting them, and they're interested in having relations for that. But the other reason is they want the benefits of Israeli innovation. Israel is the innovation nation, and the future belongs to those who innovate. And the remarkable ingenuity of young Israeli entrepreneurs who have been liberated by the liberation of the economy, which I have some role in undertaking, has created an interest worldwide in making alliances with Israel. So our intelligence and security prowess on the one side, and our technological and economic prowess on the other side, has given us diplomatic prowess. All the world is recognizing that. It's not that we don't have problems, we surely do. But I hope that the governments of Western Europe will recognize what governments in Asia, Africa, America, Asia, Australia have recognized that Israel is a great partner for seizing the future. And we're a natural and great partner for Britain and the European democracies. Because of all our partnerships, we cherish the ones with democracies. And I'll tell you why. Because freedom is precious and it must be nurtured. We defend freedom in the heart of the Middle East, and we are the partners of all those who want to see a freer, secure, and more prosperous world. Thank you.
And as you can see, Dean is taking over, so this means no more questions, I'm afraid.
And sorry for anyone who's disappointed. Prime Minister, thank you. This is your 3rd visit to the UK under the present premiership. we're delighted you've extended your stay in the UK to do this, the only public appearance of your trip here to the UK. You may be a little disappointed that the noise of the demonstration, which some of you may have heard, was actually not directed against yourself, it was against the Supreme Court. So perhaps against the odds and perhaps surprisingly, but thank you for your time. We really are grateful to you for giving your time this morning. I just want you to join me in thanking William for outstanding presentation. Thank you. Thank you, William. Appreciate it. Thank you.